Nobody's perfect.
All right, so we are joined today with a very special guest, actor, director, agent provocateur, Matt Johnson. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, we're super stoked to talk to you. We're gonna chat a little bit about your career, chat a little bit about making movies in Canada and the overall state of the industry. But would love to talk a little bit about like how you began filmmaking. So, you graduated from York University, started making some digital stuff, and then made The Dirties. Loved The Dirties, first of all.
Thank you.
That movie is hella dope. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how, like, after graduating, how that project even came about.
Well, it was because I was working with the same group of people on that web series, Nirvana the Band, the show, right out of school. So when I graduated, this was sort of like early online video era. YouTube was just a few years old, and their web shows were kind of new. It was a very interesting time. And so me and a few of my friends, like really just 2 or 3 friends, really me, Jared Rabb, who also went to York University, and Jay McCarroll, started making a web series just for ourselves for fun, and we made it for about 2 years. And then when that was done, we developed all these really great skills for shooting in public, for shooting with no money, for making improvised stories or improvised narratives where you didn't need a script, you just kind of needed a rough plan. And we found that we were very good at doing that, going out and getting stories and then coming back and fixing it in the edit. And so I had wanted to make a feature, and my good friend Josh Bowles had just seen Man Bites Dog and thought, oh, you should play a serial killer in the same way that they do this in this Belgian film. And so we watched that movie and we're like, oh yeah, there's something really interesting here. Like, we could do something about a subject we were all very interested in, which is school shootings. And wouldn't it be so cool to see a school shooting movie from the point of view of like kind of a funny kid, in the same way that Man Bites Dog is kind of like a charismatic killer. And so then we just started shooting it with the exact same production model that we used to make Nirvana the Band, the show. And it fits so well because the conceit of The Dirties is that this is a high school video project made by kids who don't know what they're doing. And I found a lot of power in that. Operation Avalanche, our next film, was very similar. Like, we've been making movies about neophyte filmmakers, and the form with which you engage the film is their own finished movie. And so not only does that give you license to do a lot of things that are cheap, like, we can't spend money on cool things like slider dollies or even tripods, which you can't set up in public places. It lets us shoot them like they are just almost like reality television shows, but even lower budget than that. Reality television shows shot by kids. And so that aesthetic allowed us to make that feature because, of course, we had no money. Like, literally, we had no money from anybody. So it let us, it's like that software concept of turning your bugs into features. Like, I actually think that's very important for young filmmakers, is take the things that make you bad and turn them into the things that are going to make you stand out. So, like, I wasn't a great writer. I couldn't write scripts very well. I wasn't great at reading text. Okay, so I couldn't really act that way. We didn't have any money, and we were limited to locations that we owned or that we could break into. And those are big problems for like a Hollywood movie, right? Like, you basically can't make a film that way. Also, we didn't know any actors. Like, all these things that normally stop young filmmakers dead in their tracks, tried to turn all of those things into what made this movie so great. Isn't it great that there's clearly no script? Isn't it great that it seems like it's being made by kids? Isn't it great that it looks like it's all being shot illegally? Like, I think that mindset, which does come from software and design, like, is really powerful as an independent arts tool.
Mm. And you mentioned surrounding yourself with a specific group and who have become not only obviously your friends, but have become your producer, like Matt Miller. What kind of skill sets or characteristics do you need to have to kind of make films the way you do?
I mean, I don't know, because I'm working with my friends, so to me it's the same system that we did when we were making Nirvana the Band, where it's like, let's just get together and have fun. And I mean, I think in terms of skills, like hard skills, you need to be pretty easygoing. You need to unlearn a lot of the film school lessons that you were taught about legally what you're allowed to do, about what's, good etiquette. Like, I mean, it's just, if you're a friend, if you're if you're a cool person, and we find that when I'll give you an example that should answer this quite well. When we had to go and hire people to make this television show we're making now, we didn't care what they had done, what their skills were, what they were good at. It didn't make a difference to us. Right now, on the crew of our show are, like, we've got editors who had barely edited anything before. It didn't matter to us. What mattered was that they got what we were doing, and that they were laid back enough that when things didn't go right, or when they had to do something that they weren't comfortable with, they didn't care. And so I found that having less experience, formal film experience, actually made it easier for people to work with us. But that's only because we come at things from such a non-traditional, formal place.
In terms of, that non-traditional like shooting that you guys did, particularly in the dirties when you're in like the high school, like you spend a bunch of time at like Peterborough Collegiate, I think.
Yeah, PCVS.
Yeah,
that school is no longer open. It was an amazing school.
Pour one out for Peterborough Collegiate.
Yeah.
How did that even like work from a very tactical level? Like, how did you get the ability to shoot in that high school, and how did you like get the ability to sort of engage with those students?
It's always a little bit different. So. With that school specifically, PCVS, Jared Rabb, who was a producer and cinematographer of The Dirties, had gone to that school. And you always need, depending, like whether you're shooting at NASA or you're shooting at a high school or you're shooting on Queen Street, you just need to have, I find that so long as you seem like you don't know what you're doing, so long as you seem like, yeah, we're just kids, we're not trying to bug anybody, it's very difficult for people to come up to you and be like, you're breaking the law. You were calling the cops, because that's not inside people. You don't want to say that, right? If I'm a teacher at a school and it seems like these guys have permission and they really aren't causing any trouble, we would get thrown out from places all the time. Right. But for the vast majority of our shoots, people kind of left us alone, because the social risk of coming up to a group of people who may have permission to do what they're doing is actually pretty high. If I was. I mean, every situation's different, obviously, but, you're shooting on Queen Street with a bunch of people. Nobody's going to come up to you and be like, hey, I don't want you shooting here. What are you doing? Don't put me on camera. It goes against what is natural for people, and so we exploit that a little bit. But in terms of like the nitty gritty, so that school specifically, we had told a few administrators we were going to be there. They didn't know what we were shooting or what it was, but they just knew that we weren't going to cause any trouble, and we didn't.
You were just like, yo, I'm going to show up with some cameras and shoot some things?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have that conversation. That was a conversation that Jared had,
sure.
but that was at that school. But we shot at many different schools. We shot at probably 6 or 7 different schools, and every school was a different approach. So sometimes we would just go and shoot. Sometimes we'd shoot outside. Sometimes we'd go in and get whatever we could. When we shot the big school shooting sequences, obviously everybody knew what we were doing, and that was at a time when we controlled everything. But in general, most of that stuff is shot in live schools with live students.
That, as much as the maybe approach doesn't change too much in terms of how you're shooting in the location that you're shooting in, the stakes must change a lot when it comes to a film like Operation Avalanche, when you're going from a high school to NASA. Can you talk a little bit about Operation Avalanche? It has not been released yet, so people listening will not know the premise yet.
Sure. I mean, Operation Avalanche is a very simple story about CIA agents in the 1960s who get sent to NASA to see if there's a Russian spy leaking secrets about the Apollo program, and instead they find out just a crazy huge secret, which is that NASA can't make it to the moon, and they're young guys and they think that they're going to solve the problem themselves. And that was a challenge because, again, it's trying to be like a fake documentary, and that meant that we needed to shoot with real people in real locations because obviously we couldn't afford to build NASA or Mission Control. And we were lucky in that NASA, at least their Galveston campus, has not changed anything because it's historical, right? I mean, obviously it's very important where Mission Control sat when they went to the moon. So all that stuff is still there. So that was definitely more complicated from a legal point of view, but fundamentally the philosophy is the same. You go to a place with some form of permission, whatever that may be, and then once you're there, you try to stay out of the way as you can, and you film as much of the experience as you can get, and then when you're home, you figure out how to use it. So there, we were in Mission Control I mean, one of the key scenes of the movie is us debating how to fake the moon landing in actual mission control while there's an entire tour group behind soundproof glass watching us taking our picture. And it's one of those moments where you're there shooting and you're like, gosh, this is never going to work. Like, somebody's going to open the door, we're going to get thrown out, they're going to arrest us, or like our embassy's going to have to come save us. And I know that wouldn't have happened. Like, let's say they did catch us, we would just be like, oh yeah, we're just filming something stupid. Like, don't worry about us. Like, you can actually get quite far on that line of reasoning. But it just had that feeling of a real heist. And like in The Dirties, because these characters that we make movies about are kind of guys that are really into heists, they're really in, like, they feel like they're in the movies, like that, just them personally, it winds up creating a great, it's like an electrical environment to shoot these scenes, because it's like, not only are we there illegally and talking about all these really illegal things, but that's what the characters are also experiencing. The characters have also snuck into NASA. The characters are also trying to create some big, massive plot. And so, of course, you can't help but be paranoid and excited and be like, oh, are they going to walk in any minute? And so, like, the resonance is one-to-one, right? Which I think it's worth its weight in gold. If you can have your characters experiencing the same thing that the actors are going through, then, I mean, you just feel that. And it's a cheap trick. It costs nothing. Literally, it costs nothing to do that. And I think it is kind of the opposite of what traditionally film education tells you to go. They don't tell you to go to that place. They say be prepared. They say to have everything ready. They say let yourself be surprised, but be surprised within this box. And that's a great model for making more traditional narrative movies. But I think, given the limitations that we have in this country in terms of the amount of money we can use, you gotta do something new. And to us, that proved to be super fertile ground of having resonance between reality and drama, because it's just so cool. Like I mean, I can tell you from experience, being in that situation, you can't replicate it.
Yeah, the process seems to be one of the most exciting parts about it. And if that comes across to the audiences when they're seeing it, that the process is, like, I feel like they will recognize that and appreciate the process, because the excitement there must have
been. And it
been,
informs content too in some pretty unique ways. Like, you will be shifted by what happens to you. A good example in Avalanche is we're in the photographic, in Apollo 11, they have this amazing photographic archive run by very smart people. We're back there talking with these people, and they start telling us, well, you know, these photographs were taken on Earth, not on the moon. And this is just a conversation we're having, and they're going on and on about where on Earth they were taken, right, what parts of Earth look like the moon, why they look like the moon, how you could fool people. And the conversation is very, like, we're just joking around, like they're trying to be friends with us. And for us, because we know our story, is like, oh my God, like this is now the turning point of the film. Right. Like, we just got the whole middle of our movie based on this random conversation that happened because we were ourselves in this moment. And you can't, one, you couldn't write to that, and two, it allows the extremely cliched to play as normal, which is something that I find all the time. In The Dirties, a great example is when I go into City Hall and ask for those blueprints of the high school, and they give them to me. So that's a moment that if it were to happen in a scripted movie, you'd be like, what? This is ridiculous. Like I don't believe that. But because we do it for real, and because our characters can talk about it happening, all of a sudden the cliched or the ridiculously rote dramatic awfulness evaporates.
Well, similarly, in The Dirties, one of my favorite scenes is when you speak to your mother, and it's your actual mother, and
right.
You walk into the kitchen, you pour yourself a glass of apple juice, and you ask her legitimately, am I crazy?
Yeah, do you think I'm crazy? Yeah, exactly.
And like it really illustrates your point in that the dramatic stakes of that conversation are like ratcheted up because it's an actual conversation with your mother. And
yeah.
It wouldn't, like, if you just had some dope actress playing your mom, like, you wouldn't actually have that real of a conversation with her. Like, and it's
from my end more so than theirs. I'll tell you, one of my great weaknesses is that I just can't fake it. Like, I'm so bad at it. Like, if I've got to do something and it's like, okay, in this scene, this is your mom, go talk to her. It's like, I'm so shitty. I can't make the leap to that. And so for me, it's much more about me than it is about, like, so much in my life. So much more about me than it is about the other performers, because, like, my mom doesn't even know she's acting, right? Like, to this day, I don't even know if she fully understands that she was in that movie. it allows them to just be themselves and for you to get lost in your own reality. And then I'm not acting anymore, or Owen's not acting anymore, or Jay's not acting anymore, because that is one of our limitations as a filmmaking team, is that we can't really act.
But you're playing into it, and that makes sense. Like,
yeah, exactly.
In terms of Operation Avalanche premiered at Sundance. It has distribution. I
Yeah,
believe
it's coming out September 16th.
Okay,
Mark your
that's what I was
calendars,
going to
people.
ask.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. And Lionsgate's
Releasing it in North America and in the UK, and then it's releasing worldwide. Like every distributor from countries around the world has it. But September 16th in New York and Los Angeles, and then next week it'll be all over.
Oh, awesome. That's exciting. I was reading I think there was a Vice interview you did where is Operation Avalanche your thesis film?
Yeah, at York. In fact, I'm graduating in a few days.
Are
Yeah,
you?
that's bananas.
Congrats.
Oh yeah. Well, I loved going to York so much, and like the master's program there is so great. They have 10 filmmakers every year do it, 10 or 11, and you can kind of do whatever thesis film you want, and it actually proved to be really useful for us because York University was built around the same time as the NASA campuses. So we got to use a lot of York infrastructure to double as NASA. Like when we had to go back and reshoot little things, we were able to just use the campus. So it was amazing. I suggest everybody check out that master's program. It is awesome.
Yeah, I concur. I did my master's at York as well. I did the MA in the cinema studies, not the MFA.
Yeah,
but
I know a lot of those profs. They're cool.
Yeah, very cool.
I'm wondering, so in like the dirties and in Project Avalanche, like there's a lot of like references to film in and of itself, right? And like you're obviously like a huge film fan, as well as the rest of your crew. And I'm wondering what do you have any inspiration in terms of filmmakers? Like, do you have any inspirations in terms of whether they're whether they're Canadian filmmakers or international filmmakers? Like, do you have any like?
Are you talking about like filmmakers that inspire our own work, or filmmakers where I'm like, oh yeah, they do a lot of references, so I think?
No, I mean like that inspire your own work. Like are there any like, say Canadian filmmakers that you like when you were like a kid, you like watch a movie and you're like, holy fuck.
That's what I want to do.
Movies.
When Canadian filmmakers, it was rough when I was a kid because I was not exposed to Canadian film in the way that I am now. But even then, like, there were not a lot of like groundbreaking Canadian film from my perspective as a young kid growing up in Canada that I saw and I was like, oh yes, I want to do that. For me, it was all American filmmakers. Like I wanted to like Spike Jonze and the usual suspects of the reasons that a lot of like people my age went to film school was because they saw like sort of that second American wave of indie filmmakers that were just like the greatest. Wes Anderson, Spike Jonze, Quentin Tarantino towards the end of it, toward the end of his good career, I should say, and so that's what I wanted to be. But I mean, I was a total dilettante at that time. Like I had no idea, even in film school, like I was terrible. That the work that I did was garbage. Like I was such a pretender. Like I really was just trying to imitate these people, which I don't think is like a bad phase to go through. I think that's actually very important.
Well, I think that's what everyone does.
Yeah, and I think
literally any like discipline, right? Like,
and so they should. And I think the denial of that, like the idea that you can just come to the table fully formed and that there was no imitation period for you, is actually dangerous. I think one of the great things that undergraduate film departments do, which they never acknowledge, is they actually get the bad films out of your system. Like you're forced to work so much and make so much stuff that, like. And that's why a lot of the times you'll find somebody sort of later on in life making their first film and you watch it and you're like, my God, this is insanely bad. I can't believe this person who's normally a regular, like intelligent individual could ever think that this is at all passable. But I think it's because you have to see what 3 or 4 or 5 little experiments actually work like before you know, okay, no, this really doesn't work for movies. And those aren't the kind of things you can get taught. You really have to go through it. But anyway, your question was about filmmakers that I admire, and now it's harder. Like Sacha Baron Cohen, we were all huge fans of. Chris Lilly, these are all performers. It's funny, but those are the guys now that I see. Nathan For You, Justin Roiland, like those are the guys who I'm like, oh my God, like that's the real deal. Like if only we could be working at that level. The guys who make, do you know Dario who makes Danger 5? You look a bit like him actually. You ever seen Danger 5?
No.
Check it out. Like drop everything. Oh
I've
my
heard
God.
I've heard like dope things about Danger 5, but I've never watched it.
Yeah, Australian television. yeah, just like incredible. The guys, his whole team, very, very similar working conditions to what we do, like a group of best friends just sort of doing their own thing, but definitely on the heels of Chris Lilly and sort of like the new Australian comedy movement. But yeah, those are the guys I look up to now.
In terms of jumping from kind of that to, I would say, what you're working on next, can you tell us anything about? I also read in Vice that you're working on a John A. MacDonald film. What's the situation there? Because it feels like your what you've done in Dirties and Operation Avalanche in terms of infiltrating a space and telling a story. This is going back in history, so this is a bit of a different game.
Yeah, you know what's funny? We face this in a big way in Operation Avalanche because like all of our strengths are, okay, we can just go into the street, shoot whatever we want, and that's a movie. And then Operation Avalanche is like, well, now we can't do that anymore because it's not the 1960s out our front door. And the original idea before Operation Avalanche was that we wanted to make. Have you ever seen the Peter Watkins film Monk? It's okay if you haven't. Very rare. Not a lot of people have seen it. So this is a documentary about the painter Edvard Munch, and this is like it's boring, but it is a riot in terms of formal approach. Yeah. It is a documentary set in a time when cameras didn't exist, and the way that people are playing to camera. It's a verite doc, so it's not like they're not really like interviewing people. Just I would check it out. That was the inspiration for this John A. MacDonald movie, which is we wanted to make a fake documentary at a time when cameras didn't exist, and we wanted to play with Canadian history and do something really like bizarre and crazy and show people that time in sort of a fresh way. But your point is totally true. We're taking away all of our good tools. It's not like I can have real performances from real people. I mean, we were getting away with murder at NASA. It was amazing that those people are as old as they are and are willing to act like they're still in the 1960s. We can't do that with the 1800s. Like, it's not like 1860s Charlottetown looks the same. I can't have a bunch of people walking around with powdered hair not knowing that they're in a movie.
I mean, I'm going to powder my hair on the daily. So
yeah,
like, I'm just putting that out there.
So we have to find those people.
You have to go to like a reenactment.
So we're trying to do like a bit more of a modern approach to it. So it's not like looking through like a scrying glass and seeing actual history. But as I said, we haven't even broken ground on that movie, so I'm not sure what our approach to it is going to be. I mean, I imagine we're going to find a very interesting way to do it, and obviously it'll be crazy. But the good news about this country is that a lot of the places that, you know, the founding fathers, John A. MacDonald and George Brown and these guys, like where they hung out, you can roughly double a lot of those places. I mean, like John A. MacDonald's house is still kicking, and I mean, it's a good challenge. I think my whole team likes to try to do impossible things because it's a great source of inspiration to work really hard. I think if we were to leave the Dirties and make another movie that was set in the modern world with the same formal rules right away, I think we probably wouldn't have really brought the energy that we brought to Avalanche. Yeah. Just because it's like we got good at it, right? Yeah. And so
challenging yourself as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and literally challenging yourself to the point where everybody, including yourself, thinks you can't do it. Because that's an interesting place where it's like, okay, so for this movie, we need to break into NASA, fool all these people, and shoot illegally in their environment. Let's go do that. Like that, you tell that to any rational person, and they would say, well, that means, I'm sorry, but that will never happen, right?
So this morning you were here and you did a really excellent panel talk about sort of the state of the Canadian film industry, and I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit because you've talked so much today, like with us, about this kind of bananas rule-breaking model that you've created with yourself and your partners, and I'm wondering how, so like you've talked about sort of issues within the industry, and I'm wondering how you would suggest to young filmmakers, like young folks who are like just graduating school today, like what would you tell them to do to help endemically fix the industry, like from the ground up?
Yeah, well, it's hard for them, and it's because they, as you said, they don't have a voice, right? And so by not having a voice and not having a connection to Telefilm or TIFF or the industry, you actually don't have the type of control that you would need to create any change, which is the whole reason that I started this whole thing, which is because I felt like I was at a point where I could say things and be listened to, and luckily enough I was. So for them, I would say the outlook is grim in terms of their own ability to change things. What they can do is, if you're graduating from an undergraduate program and you're trying to make your first film, Telefilm does have a really, really great almost grassroots program called the micro budget program, which is actually run by the film schools. So the film schools actually run this program. They select 1 or 2 filmmakers a year. I think there's 40 schools or something like that. And they make 1 or 2 movies from each school, maybe 1 movie from each school. Actually, maybe not even that many. But what I want them to do is take Telefilm every single gets about 120, soon to be $140 million a year. That micro budget program that I just described is like $1 or $2 million. So I want them to take all of the money that they give to the national, like, super filmmakers, like really big shot filmmakers who've been making movies in this country for a long time. I want them to take all of that money and put it into this program that I just mentioned, programs like that. I want them to set up a fund that exclusively only funds women. I want them to set up a fund that is only funding first features. And I want the amount of money in those funds to be equal to what they're funding films at the national level right now, which is around $40 million a year in English. I'm not talking about French. But I mean, in terms of a political movement, I don't know that apart from getting involved in the discussion, I don't know what young filmmakers can do. I know Telefilm's advice to young filmmakers is go out and make your movie, right? Do what I did, do what Kazakh did, do what Andrew Civadino did, which is, you graduate from film school, you're not ready for telefilm, which is what Telefilm would say, and you have to go on, they even use the term credit card film. You need to put yourself into debt making a movie, be it a short or a feature, to show that you have the right stuff to then come to us for actual funding. And that's what they would say. And a lot of people do it. I did it, Kazakh did it, Dino did it. But
isn't that the state of how I would say most filmmaking is made in terms of you were talking about your while you were in school and making films and saying like these are garbage, and the idea of failing, and the idea that you kind of talked today about was that it's okay to fail, that you can. It's important to fail because you're not going to learn if you don't learn any real lessons if you don't, in a way.
It's an expensive hobby that you're not going to get better at unless you are basically funded. And so, in a sense, I was funded, quote unquote, by going to film school. And that's where I was able to get all these things out of my system.
But I feel like right now, more than ever, there's more ways for content creators to create and get their content out there, market their content, make it available than ever before.
Absolutely.
And it is it's a very different playground in a way.
And that access both to technology and to a place to actually show your work it's incredible. It's as good as it's ever going to get. What that doesn't do is take the person just out of university with $20,000 debt and no prospects. That person is going to have to take a massive personal risk to make their first film. Massive, to the point that if they do fail in that system, their life is essentially over. They go from being $20,000 in debt to being maybe $120,000 in debt. And then we lose them. We've lost that voice. I don't care if they're bad at that moment. I don't care if some filmmaker has no idea what they're doing and they're really just like some neophyte and they're just playing around and they have no idea. That's okay. They can make garbage. What I want is their second film or their third film. And if Telefilm is making 140 of these movies, next year maybe 20 of those are great. And then from that 20, maybe we get 3. And then all of a sudden we have this thriving national culture of filmmakers who came up on the Canadian system, will never leave. There will be no more brain drain of these people. They're going to be demanding to make their movies in Canada because, the loyalty will be incredible. And I don't care if through that process we make 100 brutal, unwatchable, like film school level movies. It doesn't matter. Telefilm is losing 90% of their money anyway. In the conversation today, Dan brought up the point that in the national program, a lot of these filmmakers like Adam Egoyan or Deepa Mehta and Paul Gross are making movies that consistently make $1 million at the box office. But what he didn't say is that that's $1 million on $12 million budgets. These movies are losing tons and tons of money.
There's a good interview. There's a good interview with Hussein Amarshi from Mongrel Media, where he talks about the production of film being a loss leader in a general, like in the most general sense. Where if you make a film, as a general rule, you're gonna lose a whole whack of money in theatrical. You're gonna lose a whole whack of money until it gets to like SVOD, or until it gets to like a place where people can purchase it on DVD, and that's when you start recouping returns. And so it's a funny question, right? Because the industry is made as such and around such a model that you're gonna lose money, and I wonder what that means for young filmmakers. Like, does one just bite the bullet?
It's actually great for young filmmakers because we have a built-in argument for why we should be funding massive amounts of unknowns. Because the argument against doing that is, well, why would we do that? We're throwing money into a pit. Like, these movies are not going to make returns. One, you actually have a chance of making a return on a $100,000 movie, much more so than you do on a $10 million national movie. Two, you're already losing this money, right? I mean, you can look at Telefilms' returns. Like, they're making $12 million a year on a $140 million budget. It's crazy.
This is something that, in terms of having an opinion on, I may not agree with, but playing a little devil's advocate, do you think there's anything or a situation in which there's too many Canadian films being made?
I think this is another myth, and that's important. As I was talking before about failing and overfunding and making too many movies, we have institutions like TIFF to protect us from that, right? Yeah, sure, we can have 2,000 morons out there making movies. It's not going to affect us here because we're never going to access those films. It's not like all of a sudden the government's going to be like, not only are we going to make all these movies, but everybody's got to watch them. You got to watch all these terrible movies. No way. That's programmers' jobs. That's why we pay these guys so much money. They already have a great history of funneling amazing stuff to people at audiences at TIFF, and from there they launch to the world stage. Let them handle that. Too many movies is great. I want 1 million bad movies so I can get 2 great ones. I want 10 million bad movies, right? Because there is no opportunity cost to the individual viewer. They're not going to see the bad ones. We're only going to see the good ones. And the higher our numbers are at the beginning, the better our numbers are with the really great filmmakers that we get 5, 10 years from now. Because it's the filmmakers we lose because they couldn't make movies, because they couldn't overcome their own circumstances, that I'm worried about.
Yeah, to your point about like the number of films, we talked to Jay Baruchel a couple of weeks ago, and I really like the way that dude sort of like thinks about films, because he started talking about we should start making films that appeal to like Dougie in Calgary, like the dude that'll come to the Cineplex, and the dude that'll come and like he'll come to watch a movie every week, but he's not necessarily going to want to watch Kissed.
Right.
And so like
he's making movies for those guys. He just finished Goon 2, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You can't. That's Dougie from Calgary
that is
to a
Dougie
T.
from Calgary. But yeah, like, and he was talking about how we need to get to a point in our filmmaking where we're not watching Canadian films as a matter of like national duty, but we're doing it because we want to, which is like in my view, like a very interesting way to think about it, because I think particularly in film school, like you end up watching a lot of Canadian films like as a matter of duty.
Of course.
And I wonder what can be done from a very tactical level to like start making more stuff for more people.
Well, I can take what you're talking about a step further, and let's fund Dougie from Calgary's movie. Let's have him make the movie. And all of a sudden, now we've got people from their own groups representing themselves for their own audiences, right? I mean, Canada's a massive country, and there's a lot of voices, especially in Toronto. I mean, as Kazakh made the point, it's something like 52% of the population in this city was not born in Canada. And so we're not going to capture everybody with the single unified national voice of the Telefilm national program. It's insane to think that 8 movies funded for the amount of money that they fund them for are going to appeal to everybody in this country. But instead of spending $28 million on these 7 movies, you can spend $28 million on 140 films by people from all across the country, and now everybody is going to see movies that represent them. And I mean, I guess it's a bit optimistic to think that people are going to show up to see these films, but great films always find audiences. It's never been that really amazing films are completely lost. It doesn't happen. Ever. If you hear about movies that are good and you see them. You guys know this is, imagine, your life, right? The internet will find the great stuff and bring it to you. Something that got discussed today was that we need more promotional money. That filmmakers want Telefilm to be funding the promotion of our cinema so that now we can compete at the American level in terms of media buys, television buys, billboards. And I think this is another crazy myth. Like, this is a way that we have been in the past propping up brutal movies. Like, there's nothing more sickening than seeing a movie that you know is terrible, critics panned, audiences hate, being propped up by Canadian marketing dollars from the taxpayers through Telefilm, being like, this is great, come on, you see. I mean, I shouldn't, we're being recorded, so I won't say specific films, but just because it would be rude, but like
That's
that,
very Canadian of you.
no doubt. But like that is not the issue. The issue is that we're not spending money marketing these movies. That may be a reason that E1 isn't turning a huge profit on these movies, because they feel like they aren't capturing the same audience to come see them. But that's like a crazy cup game that they're playing, where they're trying to fool consumers into thinking this movie is worth seeing. Come see it, come see it. And so they need money to fool people into that. I say, get out of that game. It's a crazy game to play. You're trying to beat Americans at this game? No. Let's spend all that money trying to develop voices in this country, and if you build it, they will come. Audiences will come to see great movies. It's always been this way. Like film festivals talk about it all the time. It's like great movies find an audience. They find that person who loves them and talks about it. Very, very rare these days to find an undiscovered gem made in the last 10 years. People talk about it. And now when it's like, oh man, this undiscovered movie, can you believe it? It's always like now when you hear that, it's in the context of, can you believe how bad this is? It's like The Room, or it's like some Draft House movie where they find some 80s movie that is so crazy bad. Like that's when you can't find movies. It's that kind of stuff. It's not the great auteur cinema. That gets found.
So what we do in this show, to the podcast, to kind of end things off, usually is a pitch off, where we pitch each other on things. So it could be a film that Rob hasn't seen that I think is a cultural blind spot for him, that I'm pitching, you need to see this. Or it could be something where pitching we did one on Keaton-essence. What actor deserves a Keaton Renaissance? So
Michael Keaton, you're worth it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that McDonald's movie.
Right? No,
Yeah, I think it looks
fun.
awesome.
Yeah. So what we were planning to pitch to you, and please be very critical. No, critical.
I know.
No, we were going to pitch to you. Okay, so you're working on John A. MacDonald. What is the next space in it, or in film are you going to make in terms of infiltrating a specific space? So
you guys are going to tell me places I should break into?
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly. So and let us know like how feasible you think this is.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, I'm good at this. My producer Matt Miller should be here.
So I recognize the ridiculousness of what I'm about to suggest to you, but as an avid Raptors fan that's recently followed their playoff run.
Yes.
I would like it if you and your team somehow figured out a way to infiltrate the physiotherapy team of the Toronto Raptors, follow them throughout the season, and then into a playoff run, creating a documentary about or a mockumentary rather, about the difficult lives of athletic trainers, what it's like to stretch them hammies.
Yeah, you'd have to have somebody. The way you do it is you would need to have that, like whoever that doctor was, on side, and they would need to say that they're making this documentary about themselves.
There already is open gym that the Raptors
that
do,
they run,
which is like a thing that consistently sort of runs throughout the season.
That wouldn't be impossible. What would be very difficult in that situation is implying a narrative, like creating a story, like where like they're poisoning the players, or you know what I mean? Like that would be hard. But
that's actually why they lost to the Cavs.
Sure, like they were poisoned, or that there was some kind of I think the better film would be like an inside documentary about refs and like bribery, taking money. That'd be way higher stakes, obviously, because there's so many millions and millions of dollars on the line, and like people would be like horrified like just watching the footage, because at any moment they'd feel like you could be killed. That you'd have to do hidden camera, but you could also fake a lot of shit too for it. The great thing about the NBA or any big institution like that is that you can then take all the footage that they already have, interviews with refs, stories about them, and then just repurpose them, like take them and fuck with them on your own. So yeah, that would be difficult, but not impossible. I think that's a great film.
All right, mine is, I feel like, a little trickier in terms of infiltrating and actually getting out of. My thought was doing a commentary on the Canadian prison system.
Yeah.
And called Mr. Johnson Goes to Kingston Pen.
Sure. Well, there's a huge Kingston Penitentiary sequence in the John A. McDonald movie where we do the classic "Is this normal?" banging the strap on the desk.
I'm already predicting then. So the idea would be that you and your team break into Kingston Pen to do a documentary, and the Canadian government decrees that you're staying.
We're in jail now?
Yeah, you're staying, and then it kind of turns into a little bit.
Okay, but that would be easy because you're basically saying get arrested. I don't know how we'd film it. Have you seen Biggie and Tupac?
No, I haven't.
So watch that documentary. Amazing prison photography, like so funny. They go in and interview Suge Knight and about his involvement.
That's the most dangerous thing you can do.
They interview him on the prison grounds, like in the yard, and he's just there basically trying to advertise his own. He's like trying to say he's just working for the kids and whatever, but Nick is like pressing him to try to say that he tried to kill Snoop Dogg. It's so wicked, and that is like a really great example of how to shoot in prisons. I have no idea how they did that, but it made me think that it would be possible. The real thing is like the culture of prisons probably would not be so down with that. It'd be very difficult to hidden camera shoot a bunch of prison inmates.
And
have them be cool with that.
We're just young kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, more reason not to let you in.
Yeah. But I wonder if you could fake that. The best thing, if I was forced to do that, gun pointed to my head, you must make a film in a prison, I would go to maybe a different country and say that I'm there as an ambassador of Canada trying to make a documentary about that prison and then try to put a story into it like that. I feel like you'd have more power doing it that way. And but I mean that's definitely scary. Yeah.
We have the fun of the NBA and the terror of actual prison.
Actual prison.
Welcome to our show.
Sure. I mean, also in prison, I don't even know can you charge your batteries and stuff like that? Like, how long
do they have electrical outlets? Like, who knows?
Where are we dumping media?
You're just hiding all your sharp mics. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This
of course,
it's
great talking to you guys.
Make sure to look out in September for all of them Matt Johnson joints that'll be dropping.
Yeah, there are a couple.
We hope to talk to you again soon. Thanks, man.
Thank you. It was great meeting you guys.
Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.